She came to finalize the divorce on a cold morning that felt heavier than silence. The courthouse hallway smelled like dust and broken promises. When Ethan looked up from the papers, his heart stopped. There she stood, Ava, calm, glowing, and unmistakably 7 months pregnant. His mouth went dry. "That's not mine," he whispered, loud enough for strangers to hear. Ava didn't flinch. She only placed a steady hand over her belly and said softly, "You'll regret those words sooner than you think." And in that moment, Ethan's world began to collapse. Ava walked past him without hesitation, her heels clicking like a warning on the courthouse tiles. Ethan followed, panic rising in his chest as if the walls were closing in. "Ava, wait! Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, trying to sound angry, but his voice trembled. She stopped beside a bench, turning slowly, her eyes steady and unshaken. "Because you didn't want a wife," she said quietly. "You wanted someone you could control." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I divorced you because you were always dramatic," he snapped, loud enough for people to glance over. Ava smiled faintly, not in joy, but in strength. "No, Ethan, you left because I stopped begging." They entered the courtroom, and Ethan's lawyer, Mr. Carter, immediately leaned close to Ethan. "I didn't know she was pregnant," he whispered. Ethan clenched his fists. "Neither did I," he muttered. His eyes stayed locked on Ava as she sat across the room, her posture calm, like she belonged there more than anyone. She wore a simple cream coat, no jewelry, no flashy makeup, just natural beauty and quiet confidence. That confidence irritated Ethan, because he remembered the Ava he left behind, soft-spoken, anxious, and constantly apologizing. This Ava looked like someone who had survived fire and come out stronger. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Papers shuffled. Ethan's mind spun. He tried to focus on the divorce terms, but all he could see was her belly. Proof of a life he didn't know existed. When the judge asked if both parties were prepared to proceed, Ava answered with one calm word. "Yes." Ethan hesitated. His lips parted, then closed again. The judge noticed his discomfort. "Mr. Rhodes?" the judge asked firmly. Ethan swallowed. Yes, Your Honor." As the hearing began, Ethan tried to act confident, but his pride kept leaking through like poison. He leaned forward slightly, muttering, "So you moved on fast." Ava didn't respond, but her lawyer, a sharp woman in a dark suit, looked at Ethan with visible disgust. "Mr. Rhodes," she said coldly, "you don't get to shame her for surviving what you broke." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Ava finally spoke. "I didn't come here to fight," she said, her voice soft yet strong. "I came here to close a chapter." Ethan scoffed. "A chapter?" he muttered. "You're carrying a whole book." A few people in the courtroom frowned, but Ava didn't react. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. She placed it on the table like it weighed nothing. Her lawyer slid it toward the judge. The judge raised an eyebrow. "What is this?" Ava looked directly at Ethan, and for the first time, her eyes held something deeper than calm. "It's the truth," she said quietly. "And once it's opened, Ethan won't be able to hide behind his lies anymore." The judge broke the seal slowly, flipping through the contents with the kind of calm that made Ethan's stomach twist harder. At first, Ethan tried to keep his face neutral, but his eyes kept darting between Ava and the folder in the judge's hands. Every second felt like a countdown to something he couldn't stop. The courtroom stayed silent except for a faint rustle of paper, but inside Ethan's chest, panic was loud. He leaned toward his lawyer again. "What did she give him?" he whispered. Mr. Carter shook his head. "I have no idea," he muttered back, suddenly less confident than before. Ava sat still, hands resting gently over her belly as if she was protecting more than a child, protecting her peace. She didn't look at Ethan with hatred. That was the part that made him feel even smaller. She looked at him like he was a man she once knew, but no longer feared. The judge finally cleared his throat. "Mrs. Rhodes," he said, his voice firm, "this document includes evidence of financial misconduct and hidden assets, as well as a medical record confirming your pregnancy timeline." Ethan's breath hitched. "What?" he blurted, standing halfway before his lawyer yanked him back down. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Sit down, Mr. Rhodes." Ethan's face turned pale. "That's impossible," he stammered. "She doesn't have money. She can't even—" He stopped himself, realizing too late that he had spoken with the same disrespect that destroyed their marriage. He glanced around and saw the faces of strangers, disgusted, judgmental, unimpressed. But the worst expression came from Ava's face, not anger, disappointment. Her lawyer stood. "Your Honor," she said confidently, "my client has provided bank statements, property deeds, and proof that Mr. Rhodes withheld marital assets under shell accounts during their marriage. He also falsely reported income during the divorce filing process." Ethan shot up again. "That's not true," he shouted. "She's lying. She was nothing without me." Ava finally lifted her chin. Her voice was calm, but every word landed like a hammer. "I was nothing because you made sure I believed I was." The courtroom froze. Even the judge paused, studying her. Ava continued, her eyes unwavering. "For years, Ethan told me I was lucky he chose me. He mocked my background. He laughed at my dreams. He called me weak when I cried and useless when I asked for help." She let out a slow breath. "But what he never knew was that I wasn't weak. I was quiet, and while he was busy tearing me down, I was rebuilding myself in silence." Ethan's lawyer leaned forward urgently. "Ava, you never mentioned any of this during mediation." Ava's lawyer cut him off, because she didn't know she had proof back then. But now she does. She placed another stack of documents on the table. "And we have more, Your Honor." Ethan's throat went dry. He remembered every time he told Ava she was overreacting. Every time he took control of their accounts, telling her she didn't understand money. Every time he made her feel like she needed him to survive. Now, he watched her sitting there like royalty, while he looked like a desperate man exposed under harsh light. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Rhodes," he said slowly, "it also says here that you were the original co-founder of Rhodes Tech Solutions, yet your name is not listed on any official records." Ethan's body went stiff. His lips trembled. No, she just helped me." Ava spoke softly, but her words echoed through the room. "I didn't just help you, Ethan. I built it." Ethan's chest tightened like something invisible was crushing him, because now he understood what was happening. This wasn't just a divorce hearing anymore. This was a public reckoning. Ava leaned slightly forward, her tone steady but filled with quiet power. "You didn't divorce me because we fell out of love," she said. "You divorced me because you thought I'd never fight back." She paused, her hand resting over her belly again. "And this baby," she added, "is not a mistake. It's proof that life can still grow, even after you try to destroy someone." Ethan tried to speak, but his voice failed, because at that moment, he realized the envelope wasn't just paperwork. The judge's expression hardened as he flipped to the pages again, this time slow and more careful, as if every sentence carried a consequence. Ethan's hands were shaking under the table, but he tried to hide it by gripping his pen like a weapon. His mind raced, searching for an escape, a loophole, a way to twist the story back in his favor. He had always been good at that. He could charm investors, intimidate employees, and make Ava feel small with just a look. But today, none of his old tricks worked. Today, the truth was louder than his ego. "Mr. Rhodes," the judge said firmly, "these records show that you intentionally removed Mrs. Rhodes from the company documentation and transferred her shares under your name during the marriage. You presented yourself as the sole founder." Ethan's voice cracked. "She signed everything," he argued quickly. She agreed. "She didn't even care about business. She was just my wife." He forced a laugh, trying to make Ava sound irrelevant. She couldn't even handle stress without crying. Ava didn't flinch. Her lawyer stood again, calm as ice. "Your Honor," she said, "my client signed those documents under emotional pressure and financial coercion. We have text messages, recorded calls, and a sworn statement from the company's former accountant confirming that Mr. Rhodes threatened to cut her off completely if she refused." Ethan's face went hot. "That's not coercion. That's marriage," he snapped. A few people in the courtroom gasped. Even the bailiff raised an eyebrow. Ethan heard it, the murmurs, the whispers. The respect he always demanded was slipping away, and he couldn't stop it. Ava looked at him then, not with anger, but with a quiet sadness that stung worse than hatred. "You really believe that?" she said softly. "You really believe love is control?" The judge turned to Ava. "Mrs. Rhodes, do you wish to proceed with your claim to company ownership and compensation?" Ava took a breath, her hand moving gently along her belly as if grounding herself. Then she nodded. "Yes, Your Honor," she said clearly. "Not because I want revenge, but because I want justice. I earned what he stole." Ethan's lawyer whispered urgently, "Ethan, we need to settle this before it turns criminal." But Ethan's pride exploded before his intelligence could stop it. He stood abruptly, pointing at Ava like she was the enemy. "You're doing this because you're bitter," he shouted. "You want to ruin me because I chose someone better. You were never enough." The judge slammed the gavel, so hard the sound echoed like thunder. "Mr. Rhodes," he barked, "one more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." Silence crashed over the courtroom. Ethan stood frozen, suddenly aware how ugly he sounded. His chest rose and felt like he'd been running, but he hadn't moved. He had simply been exposed. Ava's lawyer stepped forward with a final document. "Your Honor," she said, "there's one more thing." She placed a file on the judge's desk and looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Rhodes has been under investigation already. This divorce hearing simply brought the missing piece." Ethan's eyes widened. "Investigation?" he whispered. The judge opened the file and read quickly. Then his voice dropped into something colder than law, something final. "Mr. Rhodes," he said, "the state has received reports regarding tax fraud, forged filings, and illegal asset transfers. Based on what has been presented today, I am ordering this case to be forwarded for criminal review." Ethan's knees nearly buckled. He turned to his lawyer, desperate. "Fix it," he mouthed. But Mr. Carter looked down, speechless. Ava finally stood, her belly round and powerful like a symbol of survival. She stepped close enough that only Ethan could hear her. Her voice was gentle, but deadly honest. "You didn't just lose me today," she whispered. "You lost a version of yourself you pretended to be." Then she stepped back, calm as ever, and Ethan realized the true punishment wasn't just legal. It was watching Ava rise, while he fell in front of everyone. Ethan walked out of the courtroom like a man who had just been hit by a storm he didn't believe existed. The hallway that once felt like his territory now felt like a tunnel closing in. People stared openly, whispering with the kind of satisfaction that comes when arrogance finally meets consequence. His lawyer tried to pull him aside, voice low and urgent. "You need to stay calm," Mr. Carter warned. "If the investigation moves forward, everything you built could collapse overnight." Ethan laughed bitterly, but it sounded hollow. "Built," he muttered. "That was mine." Yet even as he said it, the words tasted like lies, because deep down he knew the truth. He didn't build it alone. He simply took credit, while Ava carried the weight in silence. Across the hall, Ava stood near the courthouse steps, breathing slowly as her lawyer spoke quietly beside her. She looked tired, but not weak. She looked like a woman who had been through war and still chose peace. Ethan watched her for a moment, a strange ache tightening in his chest. He remembered the nights Ava stayed up late, laptop open, scribbling ideas, sketching plans, whispering that one day their company would change lives. He had smiled then, but not because he believed her, because he believed she belonged beneath him. And now she stood there, 7 months pregnant, surrounded by calm support, while he stood alone, surrounded by fear. He took a step toward her. "Ava," he called out, his voice softer than before. She didn't turn immediately. That silence was powerful. It was the kind of silence that says, "I don't rush for you anymore." When she finally looked back, her eyes held no affection, but also no cruelty, just clarity. "What do you want?" she asked. Ethan swallowed. I didn't know," he said, pointing weakly toward her belly. Like that explained everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" "That child could have changed things." Ava's lips curved into a sad smile. "Ethan," she said gently, "a baby doesn't fix a man who refuses to grow. A baby isn't a bandage for someone who likes causing wounds." The word stabbed him deeper than any insult, because she was right. Ethan had never learned humility when things were easy. He only felt it now that he was losing everything. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was begging. "Can we talk? I'll make things right. I'll give you what you want." Ava's gaze sharpened. "You still don't understand," she said. "I'm not here because I want something. I'm here because you took what was already mine." At that moment, a man in a suit approached Ava's lawyer and handed her a folder stamped with official letters. Ethan noticed the seal. His blood ran cold. His lawyer leaned in and whispered, "That's the state investigator. They're already moving." Ethan's stomach dropped. He turned back to Ava, panic rising. "Please," he said, almost choking, "don't do this. You'll destroy me." Ava paused. She looked at him the way you look at someone you once loved but no longer recognize. Then her voice came softly, almost tender. "No, Ethan," she said. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided I was worthless." Ethan's eyes watered, but the tears didn't earn sympathy. Behind him, his phone buzzed. One message after another. Investors pulling out. A board meeting scheduled urgently. Headlines starting to spread. His public image, the one he wore like armor, was cracking. And in the middle of his collapse, Ava remained steady, like someone who had already made peace with loss and turned it into strength. Before she turned away, she added one final line, her voice calm like a closing door. "I didn't come to ruin you," she said. "I came to stop you from ruining anyone else." Then Ava walked down the courthouse steps slowly, holding her belly like a queen holding her crown, while Ethan stood frozen, watching the consequences of his disrespect finally catch up to him. The weeks after the courtroom felt like a slow public unraveling for Ethan. What once seemed untouchable, his name, his power, his reputation, began to crumble piece by piece. News outlets didn't need drama. The facts were enough. Investors withdrew, partnerships dissolved, and even former employees came forward, sharing stories of intimidation and manipulation. Ethan spent days trapped between lawyers, phone calls, and sleepless nights, trying to patch a sinking ship with pride. But no matter what he did, the damage kept spreading. The world was finally seeing what Ava had lived through in silence. Ava, meanwhile, moved forward like someone who had already mourned what she lost. She didn't celebrate Ethan's downfall. She didn't post online, didn't brag, didn't seek revenge. She simply focused on her health, her baby, and rebuilding the future she once begged Ethan to protect. Her calm became a statement. She had nothing left to prove. She had already won by surviving. One afternoon, Ava's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When she answered, the voice on the other side was professional and respectful. "Mrs. Rhodes," the woman said, "this is Detective Harris. We are following up on a financial case involving Ethan Rhodes. We want to confirm something. Are you willing to testify if needed?" Ava stared out the window at the soft sunlight on the street, her hand resting over her belly. She took a moment before replying. "Yes," she said quietly. "Not for revenge, for truth." That truth moved quickly. Within days, Ethan was formally charged with fraud and falsifying documents. The same man who once mocked Ava for being too emotional sat across from investigators, sweating through his expensive suit, unable to charm his way out. His lawyer tried every tactic. Blame Ava, claim confusion, argue miscommunication. But the evidence was too strong, and Ethan's arrogance had created too many witnesses. Even his own accountant testified that Ethan had ordered him to alter records. The life Ethan built on ego began to collapse in courtrooms far harsher than divorce hearings. And then, life delivered its final lesson. It was a Tuesday evening when Ava went into labor early. The contractions came suddenly, sharp and overwhelming. Her neighbor rushed to the hospital, and within hours, Ava was in the delivery room, gripping the rails, breathing through pain that felt like fire. Her body shook. Her heart raced, but she didn't panic. She had faced worse. She had survived loneliness, betrayal, and fear. She could survive this too. After 12 long hours, the room filled with a sound that made Ava break down in tears. Not from pain, but from relief. A baby's cry. A nurse placed a newborn in Ava's arms, small and perfect, wrapped in a soft blanket. Ava stared down at the tiny face, trembling as joy flooded her chest. "Hi, my love," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Outside the room, a hospital staff member approached her with a clipboard. "Mrs. Rhodes," she said gently, "there's someone asking to see you." Ava's heart tightened. She already knew who it was. Ethan stood in the hallway holding flowers, his eyes swollen and exhausted. He looked like a man who had finally been stripped of every illusion. The arrogant confidence was gone. The smirk was gone. Even his expensive coat looked too heavy for him now. He stepped forward cautiously, voice shaking. I heard you had the baby," he said. I wanted to see." Ava didn't move. She didn't soften. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at him and asked the one question that shattered him completely. "Are you here because you're a father," she said, "or because you're lonely now that no one else is clapping for you?" Ethan froze. His lips trembled. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Ava's eyes held no cruelty, only truth. "You spent years trying to make me feel small," she continued quietly. "But I grew anyway. And now this child will grow with love, not control." Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry," he said. "I really am." Ava nodded slowly. "I believe you," she said. "But apology isn't enough anymore. Growth is the only proof." Ethan's shoulders dropped. For the first time in his life, he looked humbled. Can I at least meet the baby?" he asked. Ava took a breath, then stepped slightly aside, just enough for him to see the newborn through the glass window of the nursery. Ethan stared at the tiny sleeping face, and the tears that fell this time weren't for himself. They were for the man he could have been if he had known how to respect what he had. Ava spoke softly, but her words were final. "You don't get to rewrite history," she said, "but you do get to choose who you become next." Ethan nodded, broken but awake now. He set the flowers down and walked away slowly, not with anger, but with the weight of lessons finally learned. Ava returned to her room, holding her baby close, her heart steady. She looked down and smiled through tears. Because justice hadn't come in screams or chaos. It came in truth. It came in consequences. And it came in a quiet woman who refused to be treated as disposable.